Emma and John were ecstatic about their weekend getaway. After months of grueling work schedules, they had finally decided to splurge on a luxurious stay at the renowned Grand Bellevue Hotel. Known for its opulent decor and exceptional service, the hotel promised the perfect escape from their daily grind. Upon arrival, the couple was greeted with warm smiles and a glass of champagne. They were escorted to the royal suite, a stunning room adorned with antique furniture, plush carpets, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Emma couldn't help but marvel at the grand chandelier hanging from the ceiling and the intricate artwork adorning the walls. "This place is amazing," she whispered to John, who nodded in agreement. Little did they know, their dream weekend was about to turn into a nightmare. The first evening in the suite was enchanting. After a sumptuous dinner at the hotel's restaurant, they retired to their room, eager to enjoy the lavish surroundings. However, as the night wore on, Emma began to feel an inexplicable chill in the air. She dismissed it as the hotel's powerful air conditioning and pulled the covers tighter around her. Later, as they were drifting off to sleep, the lights flickered momentarily. John grumbled and got out of bed to check the switches. "Just a power surge," he reassured Emma, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They both managed to fall asleep, but their rest was uneasy, plagued by strange dreams and restless tossing. The second night brought even more unsettling experiences. As they returned to their suite after another delightful day exploring the city, Emma noticed a faint smell of perfume in the air. It wasn't hers, and it certainly wasn't John's. She shrugged it off, thinking it might have been left over from the housekeeping staff. That night, the strange occurrences intensified. Soft whispers seemed to echo through the room, and the chandelier began to sway gently, though the air was still. John woke up in the middle of the night to find Emma sitting up in bed, staring at the corner of the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice heavy with sleep. "I saw a woman," Emma replied, her voice trembling. "She was standing there, just watching us." John tried to calm her down, suggesting it was just a trick of the light or a vivid dream. However, he couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that gnawed at him. They decided to leave a lamp on for the rest of the night, hoping it would ward off whatever was haunting them. The following morning, Emma and John decided to investigate. They spoke with the hotel staff, who were surprisingly tight-lipped about the suite's history. A sympathetic housekeeper finally pulled them aside and revealed that a tragic event had occurred in their suite many years ago. A young woman, heartbroken and alone, had taken her own life in that very room. Since then, guests had reported strange sightings and eerie experiences. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Emma and John spent the afternoon researching online. They found old newspaper articles detailing the woman's life and death. Her name was Lillian, and she had been a frequent guest at the Grand Bellevue, staying there during the final despairing weeks of her life. That night, as they prepared for bed, the atmosphere in the suite felt heavier, more oppressive. They decided to try and communicate with Lillian, hoping to bring her some peace. Armed with a hastily downloaded ghost hunting app, they sat in the dimly lit room and called out to the spirit. "Lillian, if you're here, we just want to help you," Emma said softly. "We know what happened to you. We're sorry for your pain." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the room grew colder, and the chandelier began to swing violently. A spectral figure materialized before them, the same woman Emma had seen the night before. Her face was twisted in sorrow, her eyes hollow and haunted. "Please, leave me alone," Lillian's ghostly voice echoed through the room. "I can't find peace." Terrified, Emma and John watched as the apparition floated towards them. In a desperate bid to calm her, John spoke up. "Lillian, we want to help you move on. You don't have to stay here." The ghost paused, her expression softening slightly. She reached out a transparent hand, touching Emma's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, before slowly fading away. The room gradually returned to normal, the temperature rising and the lights steadying. Shaken but relieved, Emma and John realized they had helped Lillian find some semblance of peace. They packed their bags and checked out early the next morning, grateful to leave the haunted suite behind. As they drove away, Emma glanced back at the Grand Hotel, wondering how many other spirits might be trapped within its walls. Despite their harrowing experience, they felt a sense of closure, knowing they had helped a lost soul find her way. Michael had always been an adventurous traveler, seeking out unique and off-the-beaten-path places to stay. When he stumbled upon the old, quaint Hawthorne Inn nestled in a remote part of the countryside, he knew he had to book a room. The inn's rustic charm and the promise of an authentic experience drew him in immediately. The innkeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Whitaker, greeted Michael with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Hawthorne Inn," he said, handing over an old-fashioned key. "Your room is on the second floor, but feel free to explore. This place has a lot of history." Michael was intrigued by the inn's vintage decor, from the faded floral wallpaper to the creaky wooden floors. After settling into his room, he decided to take Mr. Whitaker's advice and explore the inn's nooks and crannies. As he wandered through the dimly lit hallways, he noticed a narrow staircase leading down to the basement. Curiosity piqued, Michael descended the stairs, the air growing cooler and damper with each step. At the bottom, he found a heavy wooden door, slightly ajar. Pushing it open, he entered a small, musty room filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. A faint light bulb flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the corner of the room, he spotted a peculiar wooden chest. Dusting off the cobwebs, Michael opened it to find a collection of old letters and photographs. As he sifted through the contents, he realized these were personal belongings of the inn's previous owners. One letter in particular caught his eye. It was dated over a century ago and detailed the tragic story of a family who had mysteriously disappeared while staying at the inn. That night, Michael couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The basement room and its haunting history weighed heavily on his mind. Determined to uncover more, he decided to return to the basement the following day. The next morning, after breakfast, Michael approached Mr. Whitaker. "I found some old letters in the basement. Do you know anything about the family that disappeared?" he asked. Mr. Whitaker's expression darkened. "Ah, yes. The Davises. It's a sad story. They checked in one winter and were never seen again. Some say the inn is cursed, but I don't believe in such things." Despite Mr. Whitaker's dismissal, Michael felt compelled to dig deeper. That evening, armed with a flashlight, he made his way back to the basement. This time, he noticed a hidden door behind one of the old wardrobes. It was small and narrow, as if designed for a child. Pushing the wardrobe aside, Michael squeezed through the door and found himself in a cramped, pitch-black corridor. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, and his footsteps echoed ominously. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged into another room, even smaller than the first. In the center of the room stood a single child-sized bed. On it lay a dusty old doll, its glass eyes staring lifelessly at the ceiling. A chill ran down Michael's spine as he realized this room must have belonged to one of the Davis children. Suddenly, the door behind him slammed shut. Panic surged through Michael as he rushed to open it, but it was locked tight. His flashlight flickered, and he felt a cold hand brush against his arm. Whipping around, he found himself face to face with the ghostly figure of a young girl. "Help us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Terrified but determined, Michael asked, "What happened to you?" The girl pointed to the wall, where a series of crude drawings were etched into the plaster. They depicted a family, the Davises, being led into the basement by a shadowy figure. The final drawing showed the family trapped, their faces etched with fear. "Who did this?" Michael demanded. But the girl simply faded away, leaving him alone in the dark room. Desperate to escape, Michael pounded on the door until it finally gave way. He stumbled back into the main basement room, his heart racing. He knew he had to leave the inn and alert the authorities about what he had discovered. As he rushed up the stairs, he ran into Mr. Whitaker. "I need to leave," Michael said, his voice trembling. "The Davises were murdered. Their spirits are trapped down there." Mr. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't have gone poking around where you don't belong." Realizing the innkeeper might be more sinister than he appeared, Michael pushed past him and ran to his car. He sped away from the Hawthorne Inn, vowing never to return. The authorities investigated the inn but found no evidence of foul play. The basement was sealed off, and the inn eventually fell into disrepair. To this day, locals tell stories of the cursed inn and the restless spirits of the Davis family, warning travelers to stay far away. Alex had been working the night shift at the old Riverside Hotel for 6 months. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills and allowed him to save up for college. The hotel, once a grand establishment, had seen better days. Now, it mostly catered to travelers looking for a cheap place to stay. One particularly quiet night, as Alex manned the front desk, he heard a faint knocking sound coming from the far end of the lobby. He looked up from his book and glanced around, but saw nothing unusual. Shrugging it off, he returned to his reading. A few minutes later, the knocking resumed, louder this time. Alex stood up and walked towards the noise. It seemed to be coming from the door to the old storage room, which hadn't been used in years. As he approached, the knocking stopped abruptly. He hesitated for a moment before opening the door, revealing a dark, dusty room filled with old furniture and boxes. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. There was no response. Shaking his head, he closed the door and returned to the front desk, chalking it up to the building's old pipes, or perhaps a rat scurrying around. As the night wore on, the hotel remained eerily quiet. Around 3 a.m., Alex decided to take a quick break and grabbed a cup of coffee from the staff room. As he sipped his drink, he heard the sound of footsteps above him. He knew the second floor was vacant, as there were no guests checked in that night. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, Alex climbed the creaky staircase to the second floor. The hallway was dimly lit, and the air felt colder than usual. He walked slowly, listening intently for any sign of movement. When he reached room 213, the source of the footsteps, he paused. The door was slightly ajar, and a soft light glowed from within. Taking a deep breath, Alex pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty, but the bed was neatly made, and a faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. As he scanned the room, his eyes fell on a framed photograph on the nightstand. It showed a young woman in a vintage dress, smiling brightly. The photo looked old, as if it had been taken decades ago. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Alex jumped, dropping his flashlight. In the darkness, he heard a faint whispering sound, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. His heart raced as he fumbled to pick up the flashlight and turn it on. The beam of light revealed the figure of the woman from the photograph, standing at the foot of the bed. Her expression was sorrowful, and her eyes seemed to plead for help. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Terrified, Alex backed away towards the door, but it wouldn't budge. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Find him," the ghostly woman replied. "He must pay for what he did." Before Alex could ask any more questions, the woman vanished, and the door swung open. He bolted from the room and raced down the stairs, his mind reeling. He had to figure out what had happened to the woman and who she was talking about. The next day, after his shift ended, Alex went to the local library to research the hotel's history. He discovered that the Riverside Hotel had been the site of a notorious unsolved murder in the 1920s. A young woman named Clara had been found dead in her room, and her killer had never been caught. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex delved deeper into the archives. He found an old newspaper article that mentioned a prime suspect in Clara's murder, a former hotel employee named Richard. However, Richard had disappeared shortly after the murder, and the case went cold. That night, Alex returned to the hotel, determined to help Clara find justice. He went back to room 213 and called out to her. "Clara, I know about Richard. What can I do to help you?" The room grew cold, and Clara's apparition appeared once more. "Find his diary," she said. "It's hidden in the basement. It will prove his guilt." Alex nodded, promising to find the diary. He hurried to the basement, the old wooden stairs creaking under his weight. As he searched through the dusty boxes and forgotten relics, he finally uncovered a small, leather-bound book. Flipping through the pages, Alex found entries that detailed Richard's obsession with Clara and his growing jealousy of her relationships with other men. The final entry confirmed his guilt. Richard had murdered Clara in a fit of rage and hidden her body in the hotel. Armed with this evidence, Alex contacted the local authorities. The case was reopened, and Richard's diary provided the crucial evidence needed to close the case. Clara's spirit finally found peace, and the strange occurrences at the Riverside Hotel ceased. Alex continued to work at the hotel until he left for college, but he never forgot his encounter with Clara. He often wondered how many other restless spirits lingered in the old buildings of the world, waiting for someone to help them find justice.